Morning guys, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. What I thought I'd do this morning in this video for the Trekker series on the Pathfinder Youth Adventure Training channel is show you how to make char cloth. That's one of the deliverables, and then there are fire deliverables after that that are part of this char cloth making process. So what I've got here is just a tin from a flea collar, actually Rufus's flea collar. And the size of this tin, there are pros and cons to having a very large tin. This tin's probably 4 inches across, and that gives you lots of surface area if you are striking sparks into the tin. The downside to that is it takes a little longer to char material in this tin. It takes up more room in your pack. But if you are charring materials that are not necessarily charred cloth, and you are using this as a charring tin, and you're going to strike sparks into the tin to try to catch pieces of charred punk wood, which we'll talk about later, and things like that on fire, then you want the larger surface area to be able to catch sparks. So what we're going to do with this tin is I've got just a simple flint and steel in here. We'll talk about those later on here in this video. And then just a piece of cotton t-shirt. So I'm going to wad that piece of cotton t-shirt up in here, and I'm going to punch a small hole in this lid with my knife point. It just needs to be about the size of a pencil lead. If you've got hinges on your lid, you don't really need the hole, but you need somewhere for the gases to escape, because the whole idea behind charring cloth is that you are removing one of the legs of the triangle of fire. You have heat, fuel, and oxygen. You're going to remove the oxygen by not letting this thing get air inside of it, and that's going to carbonize the material because you've got fuel in there and you're adding an intense heat form like a fire. So without the oxygen, the material can't burn. It can only carbonize or char. So we're going to punch a small hole in here, and then we're going to put this in the fire, and then we'll talk more. You can see the hole in here is just barely the size of my knife blade. Very, very small pinhole in there. Now we're just going to take this dude and set it right in the fire. And we're going to let that thing sit, and smoke will begin to come out of that hole, and that's just gas that's escaping from the material. We'll go ahead and add some more material to the fire, get it built up, and let it burn for about 10 or 15 minutes, or until there's no smoke coming out of the hole anymore. Then we'll pull it off and let it cool down. The cool down part is very important. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, once you've pulled it out of the fire, you need to let it cool to the touch. So you don't want to open this thing up until it's cool, because then you're going to let oxygen into material that's already superheated, and you're going to end up burning that material up. So it's important to let this completely cool before you open it, okay? Okay, once our tin is cooled to the touch, we can then open it up and take a look at our charred material. Okay, and you're going to have some flakes in there of paint from inside the tin. But this is basically what you want your charred material to look like. It should be black. It should not be brittle. It's got to be 100% cotton material, or it's going to feel like plastic, and it's going to be brittle feeling. This should feel like cloth, but you should be able to see daylight through it when you hold it up to the light. And it should be completely black. If it's not completely black and there's areas that are brown, it doesn't matter. You can put it back in the fire. You can't overdo char cloth unless you let oxygen to it and you burn it. Then you can overdo it. So I'm just going to kind of brush this off and knock all the flakes of paint and things like that that have come off of this inside of this tin. And now I've got char cloth that will help me start my next fire. So let's talk about how we utilize this char cloth with flint and steel. Up here. All right, so what I have is just the regular steel striker off of our website, and a piece of flint, or chert. There is no flint in the US, this is all chert. And this was found right out here at the Pathfinder School property. And the proper way to do this is to find a sharp edge on the flint, and you're actually not banging into it with your steel. You are glancing off of it. You're trying to remove small particles of iron from the steel. That's where the sparks are coming from. So you want to do something similar to this. And if those sparks are bouncing over the top, That's exactly what you want to happen. Because now you're going to take a piece of your char cloth. It doesn't have to be a really big piece. It really depends on how good your bird nest is, how much char cloth you can get away with. And you want to expose some of those edges on top of that rock, pretty much like this. And place it between your thumb and your first two fingers. And then come up here with the steel and you should be able to throw a spark right up on that charred material and have a viable ember to add to a bird nest for your next fire. You can always close the lid to put any charred material that's burning out if you are throwing sparks into the tin itself. That will, again, take the oxygen away and not allow it to burn.